Dreams of people, to me, matter as much as their credibility. What dreams sit with you at night that you cancel out during the day? And how can we integrate some of those dreams into how you work? That to me is the baseline of all human experience. Is you're quelling down the audacity to dream, and you're fortifying your conviction to behave and to stay in line. And if people feel like you're adjusting because of them, you're giving them this incredible experience of being heard. And
welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we sit down with executive leaders to explore what leadership really means through the lens of their stories, their wins, their struggles, their vision, and their lessons along the way. I'm Ty Hammond, founder of One Mountain Leadership and creator of the True Leadership Approach, an awareness-based path that helps leaders shift their focus from what to do about their problems to how to grow from them. Whether you're just stepping into leadership or are well-seasoned and at the top of your game, your potential won't be realized following someone else's script. But you can draw insights from their stories and turn it into wisdom by putting it into practice in your own life. Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we explore the essence of leadership beyond tactics and performance by sitting down with executives to hear what matters most to them. I'm your host, Ty Hammond. Today's guest is Deborah Pardes. Deborah is a creative strategist, storyteller, and community builder committed to transforming how people connect through play. As founder and chief experience officer of the Playful Society, she is pioneering a new kind of membership-based space that prioritizes joy, creativity, and human interaction over screens and isolation. With decades of experience spanning content creation, live events, storytelling, and leadership development, Deborah has led initiatives that move people out of silos and into circles. She previously served as VP at Swell, helping make podcasting accessible to everyone. So lucky to have her here today, and continues to champion projects that spark authentic conversation and connection. Passionate about reimagining culture, she blends artistry and strategy to build movements that inspire both productivity and play. It's a pleasure for me to have Deborah on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, Deborah.
so happy to be here, Ty.
Fantastic. Always start with this question. Every leader has a beginning. I found, of course, that who we are as leaders at work and in life starts well before we make it to the workforce, before we get any sort of executive role or title, and start taking shape long before. I'm curious if you're willing to share, who is someone from your early life or maybe an early experience that helped shape the kind of leader and person that you are today?
That's a great question because you made me think about Mrs. LaBelle in my second grade class. I was a tall little girl, and she made me head safety on the recess playground. And I was the youngest head safety in the school. It was a middle school that went up to sixth grade, and I was in second grade. But I was tall, and I was a kind of a fortified human. I was very outgoing at that point already and precocious. And she also saw in me an ability to get into situations and kind of be a part of them, or not. I wouldn't use the word mitigate. I was only in second grade, but I think she saw something in me. And I remember wearing that little head safety badge. And it was an incredible experience because I didn't feel separate from people, which is important to say about leadership. I didn't feel separate from people, but I felt I was given a trusted position to be there if something was not going great or if people weren't getting inside in time for the bell. And it was corralling kind of through play and love. And it wasn't an authoritarian position, but I think Mrs. LaBelle kind of did a thumbs up for me, whether she knew it or not.
Fantastic. I'm always curious. Did you ever make your way back to Miss LaBelle to be able to?
I didn't. She's long gone, of course. But I have the names of a lot of my teachers in my head, and all represent different moments in my life. And I think I was appreciative of these teachers long before I knew what that would really mean.
It really strikes an important memory for me, actually. I went to master's degree. I got a master's degree in social work. And the very first class that I had, the teacher got up. She was sitting in silence as we all were gathered there. And she got up at the chalkboard, and she wrote out in big letters across the chalkboard, she said, "You will never know the impact that you have on the people whose lives you touch." And the story that you shared with me just really struck that memory for me, because
Yeah.
some people in leadership, some people they'll come back and they'll tell you, and oftentimes they won't. But as a nod to your second grade teacher there, and just maybe as a reminder for us all, there's no point at which we don't have an impact.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And we sometimes think that it's the Jane Goodalls of the world that are the only people that make an impact because they're so available to listen to and learn from. And we have a guru culture, a cult of personality culture, and it diminishes us. And it's been interesting to watch social media from the very beginnings. I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I was watching people kind of clamor towards their phones more and more. And you think that the promise of building a global village was going to help us all become members, but it quickly was that scenario where we assigned importance to people for very strange reasons, not because they made us feel good, but because they told us we should feel good, and here's how. you know,
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. I can really see and already sense the community building aspect through your line of work. I'm really curious to sort of take the line to this next question. Of course, this is called the True Leadership Podcast, and in this,
Sure.
we explore the essence of leadership. And that saying, that term true leadership is going to mean different things to different people. So I guess I'm curious, what does true leadership mean to you, and what makes a true leader?
I think the two words that come to mind for me are the ability to listen and the ability to be flexible.
Hmm.
I'm gonna tell you a quick story about that. I used to do. I was a performing songwriter until I was 35. I did lots of things while I was a performing songwriter. Don't get me wrong; that didn't pay the bills, but I was out touring a lot, so I procured a lot of different skills. One of the things I did was I volunteered for an organization called Bread and Roses, where I would sing to incarcerated people. I did it for 13 years. And one Thanksgiving, I went to a juvenile facility with young women, and I had a set list that I was going to use. A lot of the songs were my own songs, and I would pepper in a couple of cover tunes. And I sat down, and the first song I sang was a song called Tears, which is about boys learning to cry. And after the song was done, I asked the women who were sitting around, what did this evoke for you? What did this bring up for you? And I never sang another song that session. The entire event was about the girls talking about the men in their life and if they cried or not. And the flexibility I had to let go of my agenda as a performer and be present with what happened and how it impacted people's ability to recall their own ideas of this theme was the biggest, most natural, organic thing for me. It wasn't a stretch because I read the room, I read what people needed, and I adjusted my agenda.
Gosh, I love that. So much of that, first of all, such an incredible and moving story. And it really, it makes me think about my own experience and journey as a facilitator and working with groups and teams. And I remember going through my own experience, and, at the beginning of working with teams like 15 years ago, I would spend, I swear, like 6 hours on developing an agenda
Of course.
that I was planning on delivering to a T, until, I got to say, at least 5 years into that practice, it just got pummeled out of me because it never happens the way that you plan it.
Yeah.
And then over time, seeing the artistry of really being able to listen. It's interesting. One of the questions that I think I constantly come back to is like, what is needed right now?
Mm,
And the ability to actually attune to that through listening. And
yeah.
that story that you offer just really resonates so deeply with that, because in those moments in leadership or life where, we're trying to push through what we think we want or need to happen, we can miss what's wanting to
Yeah.
happen.
Wow. Yeah. And
So,
being able to let go of the agenda that you were able to say after 5 years, like now I mean, 5 years is quite a long time to, be in conversation with yourself about, is this the way to go? Like, should I be moving around here?
well, in my experience, that is the actual rate of learning and growth is a lot slower than we might like it to be.
Yeah. That's a painful truth. And then all of a sudden you're knocking on death's door. You're like, wait a second, I have more to do.
Yeah. And so to that point with that experience, that beautiful story that you shared and with listening, what difference do you feel like that makes? Why does that matter in groups, in leadership, and community building?
I think people are assuming they're not being listened to. They're assuming they're not heard. They're assuming their voice is too small. They're assuming they have nothing important to say. They just want to kind of fit in and behave and get their paycheck. But the dreams of people, to me, matter as much as their credibility. What dreams sit with you at night that you cancel out during the day? And how can we integrate some of those dreams into how you work during the day? And that to me is the baseline of all human experience is you're quelling down the audacity to dream, and you're fortifying your conviction to behave and to stay in line. And
Mm.
if people feel like you're adjusting because of them, you're giving them this incredible experience of being heard and considered and challenged, because I'm not going to just say, "Hey, Ty, you're just switching my whole plan up because of what you said." I'm going to just say that famous line that we all need to say more. Tell me more. What you just said, tell me more. You just distracted me. I was going to do this. I heard what you said. Before I derail my agenda or my idea or my product roadmap or whatever what's at stake here, I want to ask you again, why did you say that? Where does it come from? Can you back it up with more ideas? And maybe we need to workshop this. Let's make time. And that way, I'm not being like a insecure leader, which people don't like. Oh, she's such a flip-flopper. She said this and then she did this. But if they know that she asked questions that compel her to think differently, I want that leader.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even just as you're speaking here, the word that comes up, of course, there's being seen, there's being heard, but the word that really comes up for me is like feeling valued.
Yeah.
I really get that sense as I'm talking with you about your way, about your philosophy, that there's a real willingness to be open to and be curious about the intrinsic value that a human being might have through their perspective, through the way that they're showing up, through the challenges that they might be having.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's value that comes through in like a fantastic idea, and other times there's value that comes through in somebody having a hard time that seems obstinate in a way. And I get that sense that you're the kind of leader that can harness or get curious about what the value is regardless of what's happening.
Ask you a question, because what's coming to mind about what you're saying around juggling this profound idea of having someone feel seen is I think a lot of times I've never been in a large organization, so you probably have more to say about this, but when someone is an executive and they realize there's a real exchange here that's heading over to an HR concern, when you say, I'd rather you talk to HR about this than me. What you mentioned at the top of the show before we recorded about this concept of vulnerability, like being open and talking from your heart. Where does a leader draw the line between entertaining a big conversation someone wants to have with them and them saying in their head, I want them to go to HR for this? Because someone might be needing to talk to you as the leader, and it's not about going to HR. It's not about a substantive, like, I need a change in my job or I need help with my mental health. It's more like a profound need to talk to the leader about a concept or a culture issue. And I think some leaders want to shove it off to HR because HR is more set up for handling not grievances, but things that aren't buttoned up with an agenda. You know what I'm saying? Like, I
Yeah,
think,
totally. Well, I think that the answer that I have is probably a little less satisfying than you might want. It's more of there is no one size fits all.
right,
And what I
for
would
sure.
say is the extent to which a leader, myself, you, anybody, is actually present in the moment, has the capacity to listen energetically to what is actually being said, is going to depend on that, is going to determine that leader's capacity to respond appropriately in that particular moment
Hmm.
to that individual person based on that particular context. That is the gift that presence gives us in a reality in which tactical solutions to, the mystery of life are
Ugh.
horribly short-sighted and fall short over and
Uh-huh.
over and over
Uh-huh.
again. That's ultimately the distinction between the kind of work that I do, which realizes that leadership it cannot be a set of tactics,
Right.
because
That's right. That's right.
things are
Good answer.
much too complex to have, here's what you do in this situation, because
Yes.
on its face, two situations can look exactly precisely the same and need vastly require different
Mhm.
approaches.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think I'm repeating back to you. I would say
Yeah.
listening is what's needed there.
Mhm.
And to me, that's the extent, of course, not only to which we're listening to someone else, but first and foremost, how we're listening to ourselves. And I guess that might bring me to my next question, as we're talking a bit about true leadership here
Mhm.
and what that means to you. Every leader, of course, faces particular moments that shape them. I'm curious if you would be willing to share about an experience that really challenged you and maybe became a turning point in your
Mhm.
own leadership slash human journey.
Yeah. I have a I you know, I did a lot of, contract work my whole career, mostly contract work, and I stepped into situations a lot, um, which gave me a really fresh perspective on things. I never felt, held to the fire to be a big card-carrying member of any one organization more than a year. Um, and then when I decided to do my last stay at a startup, Swell, it's very remote. It was during COVID and beyond, and it was very digital. I was on my phone, and I'm an extrovert, so COVID was hard for me. But this was double hard because even when COVID was over, I was still standing there looking at my phone and talking to people about connection and about, I listened to over 110,000 conversations. I participated in 34,000 conversations. I facilitated over 140 interviews with stakeholders in different varieties of organizations throughout those 6 years, on and off, and then smaller conversations, number even more. I was miserable though in my heart because I had two people that I worked with that I'd hired to do community management to really get people to talk. I'm saying this, I hope this doesn't upset people, but one of the women worked for me for 3 years. And when she was let go for financial reasons, the founder just told me to let her go. And I did let her go, but I wanted him to send her a note of gratitude because she was an exceptional person. And I had to tell him that. And it was uncomfortable for me. I'm number three in the company, but he's number two, and there's a hierarchy. And I had to say, listen, I need you to write her a letter because that wasn't okay. And he did. And I think it came from the heart, actually. I think he was appreciative of my reminder that we need to do these things in life. But what it left me with is like, I don't want to be around too many more people like that. I want to be around people that are going to elevate me, that are caring and intuitive and human. And I realize it's not his or that world's fault for creating him the way he is. I think that the digital world, the remote world, is creating an abundance of disconnection. And that's why I'm forming the Playful Society, because it's not just about games and play. It's about training people to facilitate as game ambassadors, as play ambassadors. And that training program for me is going to be about being human again. And I know that sounds super weird, but that moment with him not sending her a note after 3 years, it was a moment for me where I said, this is difficult. I have to do it. I have to tell him. There was no lightning. It happened. He did what I asked him to do. I sent a very sweet note. It was almost jokey. Come on, like you want to send, that kind of tone. But it was a moment for me to realize it wasn't about authority. It was about disappointment.
Story seems so indicative to me, of course, right at the center of uh, the influence that technology has on our capacity to connect with each other as humans. Part of what I'm hearing in that, and listen, I'm a father. I've got an 11 and 12-year-old right now navigating the devices and all of those sorts of things. And, of course, that coming into, really highlight my own used with that and to what extent that disconnects me, right?
Hmm.
And the honesty of that, and part of, I think, what I'm hearing and taking from that, and I hope that you'll have more opportunity to talk about the playful society later here, recognizing what a choice it is. I think one of the things that I think about leadership is that, performance is something that captures attention, but leadership directs attention. In other words, we choose where we place attention.
Beautifully said. Wow.
And we choose with practice over time, and that choice compounds. And when we choose to pay attention to human connection and to the impact that we have, and don't just sort of default to the world as it's given to us and default to the technology as it sways us, and that
Yeah,
that really is what makes a difference.
completely.
Beautiful. I'm curious to hear, maybe expounding a little bit. I'm really interested in these sort of like these turning point moments,
Yeah.
right? Specifically in leadership. What do you feel like, either that one, I must be, it can be that, or another one, right? Another experience. But what did you have to outgrow or let go of in order to step into that realization of where you were at, or that sort of next place in your own leadership and growth?
That's a really good question because sometimes when you outgrow something, you try to put it in a sock drawer and never look at it again because you don't want to be tempted to go backwards. I think I've never had the imposter syndrome conversation with myself. And I feel fortunate. I've never stepped in the bathroom and looked in the mirror and said, wow, you're just not who you are. How could they be giving you this role or how could they be trusting you? I think it's only because I've had incremental growth my whole life. I've never really did huge leaps. I've always like, this makes sense. This makes sense. Everything makes sense. Everything rolls. I'll do this. I'll do this. I've never done huge leaps. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying that I think imposter syndrome sometimes happens when someone gives you a huge amount of accolades or an opportunity and you're like, me? So that wasn't my Achilles heel, if you will. But I think something I've let go of through a lot of work is my self-worth financially. I think I've done a lot of things, especially in the nonprofit world, pro bono, and then I started asking for fees for certain things. But I'm at a point right now where I'm in a position where I'm looking for investors and I'm looking for to do interesting things in a different way. And it's not so much naming a price. It's letting go of the fear that someone won't be in line with you and understand what they think you're worth. It's the partnership idea. We always think I'm worth this much and I'm going to tell them. That's like in the sock drawer for me now. What's really on the table for me when I negotiate things around my money and what I'm deserving of is I want it to be, I don't want to say, well, what do you think I should? It's more like, let's look at the structure of what we're building. Let's look at your budget. Be transparent with me. Chunk will I take out of it and what will the return be? And how can we work together so that it can scale so that everything I do has milestones? And so I've developed language around money with the person I'm about to ask for money from. They're asking for my services. I want to ask for their money. If I'm asking somebody to come to an event I'm doing, you know, it's an art form to be able to say, to not think that you're being, it's such a magic a potion that you need to drink every time you're about to name a price. So I think what I'm saying is it's not a battleground for me anymore. It's a garden. I'm just gardening. What's going to emerge? What am I watering? Who am I inviting in? How does this fertilizer of money going to help us grow? And that's a shift for me that I'm moving away from the put the shield on and fight for my right. It's more like let's get in the mud together and get messy and grow things.
How do you think that's helping you grow?
Oh my God. First of all, metaphors. I love the metaphor of gardening because during COVID, I just became crazy in my garden. And it's helping me soften around money and not be angry at somebody else and not be angry at myself. It's just giving me a softer edge around business in general.
Beautiful. I'm curious, if, and this next question is a little bit about, how you've supported yourself over time through
Yeah.
leadership. Thinking about your journey over the past few years, maybe with this particular, the worth and the value and all of that piece. What's been the most valuable investment that you've made in yourself, whether maybe a coaching program, a community, self-study, whatever it might be, and what difference has that made in your
Wow.
leadership
Well,
personal growth?
for the first time, I have a coach for this new project, which has been so fun. She's wonderful, and that's a gift. I have to say, if I wanted to look at the big map of my life, and I would put this out to anybody who's slightly disconnected from their network, is I take care of myself by having gatherings, whether it's a dinner party or a party or an event. I used to have for many many years. I want to start again, but he said this thing called show and tells, and people would bring an object and talk for 5 minutes, and then we'd eat. So all of a sudden, by the time we eat, like 30 people know each other really well because they all had 5 minutes to talk. And I did that for me as much as for my community. And I continue to believe that if you're feeling wobbly, invite a friend for dinner. If you're feeling disconnected, have coffee with someone who has your back. Friendship, connection, trusted advisors. I can't tell you how much trusted advisors have guided my life. I sit down with people all the time and say, I value you. I don't need you to be a sounding board. I need you to get in my face and tell me what you're thinking. Two kinds of friends, right? One listens and
Yeah,
one just talks at you.
I can be both.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I'm sure.
All right, two quick questions. First, I'd love to give a shout out to any good coaches that you have. So the current coach that you're working with, a little shout out for whoever
Yeah,
that is.
yeah. Michelle, she's I'm spacing on her last name right now. Oh my God. Perkins, Michelle Perkins. She's got a limit. It's called Limitless something. Limitless. She's a beautiful coach. She's based in Malibu. She's Michelle Perkins. You could find her on LinkedIn. She's just a combination of love and more love and
Fantastic.
business acumen and you know, she's actually part of Pinnacle, which is a big coaching company. She doesn't work, she's just somebody who's been working under them as a member, and she's working with me. So the gift that keeps on giving, right?
Fantastic.
So
Well,
she's thank you.
shout out to her. And then my second question, does me hosting you on this podcast get me invited to one of your dinners?
2%. It's funny. I had 18 years in your neighborhood, so I go up there quite often, and I'm overdue, and I need to do a show and tell up there. So
Fair enough.
you have
Fair enough.
I'm going to ask you and your wife to host. So what are you talking about?
I think we will. That sounds great. All right. So leadership, of course, is also what we're shaping for tomorrow. This is where, quite honestly, I hope to hear a little bit more specifically about your vision for leadership, for playful society, your legacy, or the impact that you want to have in the years ahead.
Yeah. um, I guess what's front and center for me is how I want to build this new company and entrust people to feel like at home in this space, whether they're training to be a play ambassador or whether they're coming to play Mahjong at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in a space I secure. But the pointed question you're asking really is the legacy piece, and also how does leadership shape a company? The fish rots from the head, that whole idea. And culture eats strategy for breakfast. These are over here. But what's really front and center for me is a book I read by Priya Parker called The Art of Gathering. And I think everything's a gathering. I think work is a gathering. I think school is a gathering. Everything's a gathering. So it's a great book to read. Shout out to Priya Parker. But there's two things. I actually have to read the book again because I read most of it before COVID. Then COVID happened and I was angry at the book because I couldn't gather people. But inviting everybody is inviting nobody is a really formative thought for me to work with all the time. And also another thing she said was, there's no such thing as a relaxed host. And that to me is a great leadership moment, because you can be chill as a human being, but people need to feel that when they step into your experience, whether it's an office or a party, that you've got it. It's about to happen. Even if you're like the most happy, go lucky, chill, a rollerblading through the main quad of the office, what's going on. And it puts you to the mat and says, do you know what's going on? Have you checked in with your trusted advisors? Have you written things down? Have you checked the list twice, like Santa does? Those are the things that make me feel like my legacy, hopefully, is a combination of I showed up and I was ready, and I was also ready for what I didn't know was going to happen.
Well, I love that so much. Can't help but there's this. I'm a deep fan of the Tao Te Ching, and there's this little quip that came up years ago for me, which I think speaks a bit. I'm curious how this resonates for you, but it's a swept floor goes unnoticed. And what I mean by that is that when people walk into a space, right? If the floor is swept, if the space is kept, people won't pay attention to the floor. They'll pay attention to each other.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have
So good.
the ability to pay attention to that. If a swept floor is unnoticed, what they'll do is they'll pay attention to the unswept floor. And
Wow.
so there's really this, and there's a little adage onto that, which is a swept floor goes unnoticed, except for by floor sweepers, by sweepers floors. So as a facilitator myself, and as someone who knows that in order for people to come into a room and feel the effortlessness that of connection in a space, to know that, to feel like it just sort of magically happened, that there was a lot of floor sweeping
Mhm.
that happened prior to that happening to ensure that that space
Wow,
was
that's beautiful.
set.
It's such a beautiful, I love how old that is too. What is that, like 3,000 years old or something? Like just the Tao, the whole concept of knowing that.
Well, that I just want to say that the swept floor goes unnoticed is my little quip that was based on my
Oh,
it's like inspired. It was
so
like
it's only a couple of decades old. I love that.
deeply inspired by the Tao. It's the
I
only
love.
one I've come up with that
I'm gonna
comes
put you on
anywhere
my.
close to that
I'm
one. But
I'm gonna
that one
put you on
keeps
my
on
wall.
giving. So I
That's
do.
fantastic. You're on your way.
So
You're on your way to your own Bible. This is awesome.
no, 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 none of those.
That's great. I
Beautiful.
love it. I love it so much. I love it because it's so true. It's so, 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 so true. Yeah.
I certainly have found that way. Well, I do have another question here. We've already hit on it potentially a little bit, but obviously, true leadership, that journey of leadership, of being human, is always evolving. You've already spoken a little bit
Hmm.
potentially to what one of your current growing edges are, but thinking about what true leadership means to you, your vision for the future, everything you've spoken about today, what is your biggest growing edge right now?
Partnerships. What does it mean for partnerships? I want to say something before I forget about something you just said. I really, and this is a shout out to anybody in the middle of their life right now who is pivoting in positions and doing something new or not doing anything at all. Leaders show up everywhere. They don't need to have a staff. Being a leader for me has been a full-time job no matter where I am, no matter you have a leadership role if you are a leader. Leadership shows up everywhere. It shows up in your kindness to the Uber driver. It shows up as someone who sets a tone, who creates a world by being present and excited about opportunities that are presenting themselves to you. So you don't have to be an extrovert to be a leader in a moment. You have to just be zoned into what's going on in that moment. So I just want to shout out to anybody who's not a leader in a traditional sense, that maybe they're a leader anyway and they could show up as a leader. But back to your comment about like the growing edge of me, it's figuring out how to nurture partnerships in an authentic way and not feel scared that you're using somebody. It's a dance. And I'm really in the dance right now because I need people right now. I need their partnership. I need their guidance. I need their connections. When you start a company, this is my third sort of initiative of doing something unique and on my own. Maybe my fourth actually, where I really dug in and did it for several years and had to get support. So I guess in this incarnation of a startup, it's how do you know how to ask for a true partnership without scaring someone off? Um, how do you find out what they can do for you? Because you probably don't know. You think you know they can do for you, and all of a sudden you found out a whole other layer of things. How do you resource that person respectfully, organically, and efficiently? Because you don't have all the time in the world. So, in my moment right now, I'm trying to figure out my partners, um, and get in there and be really alive in that relationship, so that what comes from it is going to move my company ahead.
I really love that. I'll tell you, of all the questions that you just asked there was one right at the beginning that you asked that captured me the most, and it was, what is partnership? And I just love that level of, you know, of what leadership is, so oftentimes realizing that we have these preconceived concepts maybe of what something is, but being willing to ask a question. As I told you before, the question, what is true leadership, right?
Mhm.
A question that I continue to ask and that I'll never get the full answer to, but to ask, what is partnership?
Mhm.
What does partnership mean here? What does it look like now? And how differently that might look throughout one's career or based
Mhm.
on the context is just such a powerful
And like
practice.
you said, it's case by case, right? It's not, it's every person is so unique to what their appetite is for connection, what they have as a resource, what their time management's about, how they see you, through what lens, how do you have to break that lens and have them see you in a different space? I could just tell you very quickly that, I went to a good school. I went to an Ivy League school. I was bit by the performing bug and by the music bug, and people were confounded that I went in this direction for as long as I did. And to reimagine myself constantly from being a performer to being a partner and a leader and a to not being on that stage was such a beautiful journey to help people leverage. I leveraged their sense of me as a person that could stand up and do something, but I didn't want them to be confused that I was just that I was an artist that had no
Yeah.
roots in real business acumen. So there's so much that goes into being a performer and setting up your own tour schedule and doing 6 CDs and being out in the world and negotiating your own fears with other people's desire to make you be afraid. It's a huge journey. I would say that one thing I'm critical of in our society is there's not enough absorption of artists to become regular people when they're no longer artists. We're talking about actors and directors and stunt people and costume designers and songwriters and singers, and they just a lot of them have crisis at like the age of 40, and they're just running around pretending everything's okay.
I feel like we could open up a whole new aspect of the conversation there. And, I feel like that conversation comes right back around to what we were talking about earlier as value, right? And what we value as human beings, what we value as
That's
society,
right.
what we value in a particular sort of, economic structure and all of those things, and what ends up getting attention and energy and funding and love and, notoriety.
Yeah.
So I have no doubt that you have something more to share with us here. You have the time and the space here at the conclusion of our chat together to offer to our listeners whatever it is that
Uh-huh.
is most in your mind and heart to share right now. You've already shared so beautifully and so deeply and so well with us already, but anything at all, take your time. Floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, it's great to talk with you. I mean, just to riff a little bit on what you're doing and why you're doing it. People need friends, they need guides, they need coaches, they need cheerleaders, and I think there's not enough of them, and a lot of people didn't get them at home, or they don't get them with their partners, and they have to outsource. And it's smart if they get the inkling to do so. And I really I have a lot of people I know in the world of facilitating and coaching and mentoring, and there's never going to be enough of them, because I think that if every person on earth had a person like that, we'd have a really kick-ass world. But people flounder and they never find that person to talk with or dream with or analyze with. And they might go to a therapist, but therapists are more to listen. They're not tactical. I'm a big fan of what you're doing. Shout out to you. Um, I mean that. Um,
Thank you.
the other thing I want to say, what top of mind for me is the why of the Playful Society, because it doesn't matter. It's almost like the fact that I'm starting this up and I have a website and I'm LLC'd and it's a real company and it's something I'm excited about. I think the message of it is as important as the company itself. The message of the fact that we're living in a time when people are full of anxiety, and the release of anxiety through play is a real time tested tool. I've been spending a lot of time reading journals. A lot of them are available at the National Institute of Play. I've been reading a book by the founder called Play, and there's another book I'm about to read called Wonderland. People are experts at why people play, and it's not like crazy news. It's like, basically it's a catalyst for innovation, for joy, for connection, for thinking outside the box, for productivity, for mental health, for everything you'd expect play to be. It is. And that's not to be undermined by anything else, by the success of a play company or not. But what I'm doing right now is trying to build an awareness through creating the Playful Society. The playful, by the way, is spelled with two L's, so it's two separate words: play, Playful Society, for those of you listening. And the Playful Society .com purports the idea that we might be lonely in a crowd of people, and that's a really bad feeling. And we're trying to work through what that feeling is by saying, what do we do to feel connection? And the lowest hanging fruit sometimes is to join a game that your friends have invited you to play. So it's not really about the Lonely Hearts Club of people coming to meet somebody. That causes great anxiety. It's about having a friend and saying, let's go over to the Playful Society. They're doing this, or we're doing this. The idea of creating house parties around the country where people are facilitating their own play experiences because they've been to a 2-hour seminar with me or something is my biggest hope and dream, is to, like what they did with the Tupperware world, where they said, you're going to make a little money and you're going to make some friends and you're going to sell a couple of pieces of plastic. It wasn't anything that they didn't know that they were healing a nation of lonely housewives. They had no idea. I always I have to tell this quick story because it's unintended consequences, which I love, by the way. I was at a conference in San Diego about the climate, and Philips, Philips is a big company. They make light.
Yep.
Anyway, there was an executive on the stage, and he talked about lighting a soccer field in Africa. And they had nighttime soccer because they lit the soccer field. And they discovered around the poles of every light, there were schools. People started having night schools because they had no electricity in their homes. So the people came out of the villages, sat around the poles, and run classes all night. And I thought to myself, best story in the world, by the way, for an executive to tell. Like, I'm going to invest in you. Strategically placed, I have to admit. But I think about that story a lot as a guide for me about unintended consequences. Like you said, you don't know the impact you're going to have on somebody. I feel I don't know the impact I've had, but as a musician, I know people have said to me weird things like, Deb, that one song, I just tell you, I never forgot it. And I love it. And that's beautiful. Like, it's an ego builder, but beyond the ego, which I don't need any more of, it gives me a sense of place in someone else's life. And one more story to connect to the playful philosophy. I was hired to facilitate an evening with HR team of Sony. I'll use their name. Who cares? They can sue me. And there was about 40 people. And I did a show and tell for them. The vice president of Sony HR was there, and the 40 heads of their divisions were there. And they brought little objects or little pictures, and they talked about themselves for 5 minutes. And it was a wonderful evening. The next day, I had the chance to do an appreciative interview with the head of HR. We sat on a stage, and there was his team around. It was a very small room. It was very intimate still. And I said, what'd you like about last night? And he said, well, my assistant, I've had her for 11 years, and I never knew she skydived on weekends. And I turned it around, and I said, I have to ask you a question. How could you work for someone for 11 years and not know that they risk their lives every weekend for fun? What kind of world do you have where you don't know that? I was pretty pointed, Ty. I wasn't like I wasn't I was sweet, but I was really upset, because to me, that's a big bubble of like, I wanted to pop that bubble of like disconnection. And how playful is she that she jumps out of airplanes? She's like 4'9", this woman. It was incredible. She showed a picture of herself, and he was very emotional about it. He was like, I don't know.
It strikes me that within a container of play, pointed wisdom like that has the potential to pierce more deeply, potentially.
Beautifully said.
So thank you so much, Deborah, for sharing your stories, your wisdom. I've very much appreciated and enjoyed our conversation today. And I am sure that whoever listens to this conversation is equally going to enjoy it. Thank you so much.
Oh my God,
being
it's so great. I'm really happy that you're doing this series. I think it's true leadership is a heavy word, heavy frame of like, what is true leadership? So I think you're asking us to show up and really think about it from the perspective of our lived experience, but also our aspirations, which are both really, really important.
Thank you so much, Deborah. It's been a pleasure. That's it for this episode of the True Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this to catch future episodes. This conversation was brought to you by One Mountain Leadership, where we help leaders grow the capacity, confidence, and presence of true leadership through the True Leadership Approach. To learn more about the approach, our offerings, our community, and how we can help you realize your potential in both leadership and in life, visit us at onemountainleadership.com.